There's a line on the ground that'll take you anywhere. If you want to go somewhere in particular, you gotta follow the right line. But there's a line on the ground most places.
Hello, this is David C. Lowy coming to you from KPFT 90.1 Houston. And this program is called Houston EV HUB, presented by the Houston Electric Vehicles Association. And we have some of the officers, all of the officers of that organization with us. We're going to speak at some length about their experiences with automobiles over the years and then what led them to electric vehicles and why they prefer those. Many people think that the electric car phenomenon is a new thing, but it really isn't. In the early days of cars, as far back as 1897, electric cars were the best-selling cars in America. Well, that's not saying much because there weren't that many cars in America at the time, but they outpaced steam-powered cars and gasoline-powered cars and held the lead for a while into the early part of the 20th century. And electric vehicles started out as being means of public transportation. They were thought of as taxis. And because the batteries were limited in their capacity in those days, and they were the old lead-acid batteries, they devised schemes to swap out batteries once they were exhausted at a central location. And within seconds, they could switch batteries and they'd be able to continue taking passengers. So it's not a new phenomenon. And then in states like California, which leads the United States, has over 1 million, and they're followed by Florida with several 100,000, and Texas similarly. And then you get to Houston, and we have a ways to go to catch up with the rest of the world, but many countries in the world are committed to eliminating the sale of internal combustion engine cars, within the foreseeable future. And I think it would be good if the United States were part of that trend to help the environment. To me, I understand that electric vehicles are really only going to be very helpful to improving the environment when they are charged by solar energy, because then they won't rely on power plants to provide the electricity for charging their cars. I've driven since 1969 when I was 16 years old, so you can do the math there. But the last 12 or so years, I've been happily driving electric vehicles, and I find them especially convenient, reliable, clean, low maintenance, any number of things. And especially, I like to point out that they're very powerful vehicles. So if you enjoy the ability to get out ahead of the herd, which I like to do, you can do that. And because I always feel like the further I am from other vehicles, the less likely there is to be an incident. But I could go on and on about my personal history, and in future programs I probably will. But I'm privileged today to have the officers from the Houston Electric Vehicle Association to share their views about automobiles in general, their personal history with them, how they came to be driving electric vehicles, and what they enjoy about that. So we're going to start right off with the president of the organization, Dave Hansen. And I'm just going to give you the floor, and you can take a few minutes to tell us about your life with cars. Dave?
All right. Thank you, David. So this is Dave Hansen, and I'm the current president of the Houston chapter of the Electric Vehicle Association. So if you see something that says Electric Auto Association, that was our old name. But we want to embrace all kinds of vehicles, not only cars and trucks, but airplanes and two-wheelers and just about anything else you can imagine that can be electrified. And I've been a member of the club since 1994, and the club had been going strong before that. And back in those days, most people would do a conversion of a gasoline car that had a blown engine and they would do their own. But there was also a company called Jet Industries. They went bankrupt, but what they did was they got gliders from Chrysler Dodge Corporation. So I had a Dodge Omni that was built by Jet Industries as an electric vehicle. And I got that in 1995, and I drove that around Houston. It had lead acid batteries, and I had this great big charger box in my garage. And it only went something like 25 miles. And so it was good for driving around the part of Houston that I live in. And so it was good at the time. Got sold off to a professor in Austin when I had a posting overseas for a little while. And so last I knew, it was still being driven around in Austin. Nowadays, our club members come together at our monthly meetings and at our special events. And typically they're getting cars that are made by the world manufacturers nowadays. And there's quite a bit of competition going on.
How do people find out more about Houston EVA?
So there's a lot of different media availability. So if you want to start with our website, we are houstoneva.org, and that'll get you information that will also tie to our Facebook and other social media accounts. And so we like spreading the news about how much fun we have with EVs, and I'll tell people about all the advantages that they have through those sources.
Well, can you tell us something about your experience with the typical internal combustion engine car?
Well, I've driven cars since I turned 16, and they were all gasoline cars up until 1995. And they have the typical maintenance issues and the typical problems. They break down just due to the number of moving parts that you have to get a gasoline car to go. Electric vehicles are a lot simpler, and so they are more reliable. During the times that I've had various gasoline cars, I had the typical issues with them. Not as bad as some friends who I've had, they've had engine problems and transmission problems and things like that. Well, as I said, with all those moving parts, it's not surprising that people have issues with those.
And I've talked with you before about the fumes that are created when filling a car with gasoline, and you mentioned there was some problem with that in your family.
Yes. My wife is very sensitive to odors, and so she never liked going to a gas station. Typically, I would try to do that before we had the modern electric cars that we do now for all kinds of trips. And so she was thrilled when we got our first modern electric vehicle. That was in 2015. And since then, she's hardly ever gone to a gas station. And so she is so glad that she doesn't have to be subjected to the odors at a gas pump.
I think people have a lot of concerns about what we call range anxiety. In other words, the ability to reach your destination on the amount of battery charge you have. Can you mention any kind of challenge or adventure that you had in that regard with your vehicles?
Well, I often mention to folks that with electric vehicles, you have your short range trips and your longer range trips. And for your shorter range trips, which for most people are the vast majority of their trips, it is so much easier. You don't have to do any planning if you have a place where you live that you can plug in overnight. I sleep overnight, and so when people ask how long does it take to charge, I go, I don't know. I take 3 seconds to plug it in before I go in and eventually go to bed for the night. And it's like kind of like the Groundhog Day movie. It's just magically full again the next morning, and I can make all my local trips. But I do tell people that for longer driving, you do need to do some planning. And there are excellent tools out there. Some are built into some of the cars. And I've gone from here in Houston to see relatives in New Jersey, and then now to the Midwest and back, and had no problem at all. You just have to plan on where you're going to be stopping to get your charge. And with the cars built, like I said, around 2015 or so, you do have to allot more time The more modern ones, if you were to buy a brand new, it would be just about the same amount of time at each stop as at a gas station, especially if you need to go and use restroom or get a bite to eat or something like that. So you do need to do the planning because there's not a charging station on every corner like there are gas stations on every corner in most urban areas. But it is not a problem at all. With the planning, you can go all around the U.S. and into Canada and Mexico and around Europe. People are using electric vehicles a lot. In Asia, they're using them a lot. And I don't think that they would have gained so much popularity if it was a problem that couldn't be overcome. As I said, it just takes a little planning for the long distance trips.
I understand from a relative in California that there are chargers virtually on every corner. So
Good.
Houston and Texas are a bit behind on that, or more than a bit behind, but they're working on it everywhere. And
Good.
what amazed me when I first started driving was that you can plug the car into your ordinary house current, and albeit a slower rate, you can charge your car right in your garage.
Yes, and I've mentioned to people that, they've been concerned about, finding places away from where they live to charge. And I say to them, if your driving needs are modest, i.e. you're not doing a 90-mile each direction commute morning and evening, if you're just doing things around in your neighborhood and so forth, for a lot of people, they don't need a 240 outlet, just a regular 120 outlet. And most cars, they come with the charger cord. If your driving needs are modest and you sleep overnight or sleep for 8 hours a day, you can just charge up your car during that time and it can meet all your needs. So not everyone needs the higher power charger.
Well, we're going to turn to Robert Sanchez now, Vice President of the Houston Electric Vehicles Association. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that there have been concerns about fires generated by some electric car batteries. And what we need to consider is that the number of car fires with ordinary internal combustion engines is tremendously greater number than have occurred with the very serious fires with some electric cars. But Robert, it's your turn to chime in and tell us about your experiences with cars in general and with electric vehicles.
Good morning.
Morning.
I, like most everybody here, like most red-blooded American youth, started driving around 16. I've been driving since the early mid-'80s. Almost all of them internal combustion engine cars, or ICE cars as we call them. And I've had all the joys and trials and tribulations of an ICE car. The thing about my current car, it's a 2020 Chevy Bolt, B-O-L-T, as opposed to Chevy Volt, V-O-L-T, which I leased before, which is a plug-in hybrid. Just not having to worry about going to oil changes. I've got over 50,000 miles on it. If I had a equivalent ICE car, I would be spending a lot on money on oil changes, tune-ups, spark plugs, fluid changes, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a good investment long term. So if people are talking about, well, the EV premium, yes, but between tax credits, which some are going away, unfortunately, and long-term expenses for maintenance, it's not that you didn't have to do, fuel costs and diesel and gasoline. It's a good deal financially as well.
I should mention that our organization talks about all kinds of electric vehicles, but in this program, we're not promoting any particular vehicle, but inevitably brand names will come into the discussion in context. Anything else you want to add about adventures you've had with electric vehicles?
I have not taken any long-term trips, but as Dave was pointing out, you do have to plan it out. BetterRoutePlanner.com is a good source. You have to know, okay, where you're going, what are the charging stations along the way, what do I do in case this charging station's down, and the modern apps will tell you if they're down, if they're busy, etc. Um, it's not impossible to go across the country in an EV nowadays, but you do have planning. For those that still have range anxiety about long distance trips, I just tell them rent a ICE car, borrow an ICE car, and then use your EV locally and semi-locally. And I don't get into a lot of endless debates and needless debates about EVs. And so if an EV is not for them, it's not for them. If it doesn't meet their budget or their needs, I tell them don't get an EV. In a few years, it will meet your budget. It will meet your needs.
And
All
if
right.
I could chime
Yes.
in again here, David, just in terms of number of miles, one of our EVs in the family has 130,000 miles on it, and we've put all of those miles on, and the other has 150,000, and we put all but 15,000 on that because we bought it as a 1-year-old used car. And those are 2 out of our 4. We're a family of 4. We've had 4 EVs, and we've never sold one of them. So we keep driving them and driving them.
Yeah, we're on our 4th. As of now, we lost one to the Hurricane Harvey floods, but
Ooh.
I want to point out that Houston Electric Vehicles Association holds regular meetings almost once a month on the second Thursdays of each month. Sometimes there are special events that preclude those. And there are events like an all-electric car rally coming up in Austin in the first week of April. And it's easy to search that. Just search Electric Car Rally Austin. It's part of the Earth Week observances. And I want to turn to Colin Lowen now to share your experiences with cars and electric vehicles. Colin is the treasurer of this group.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, I was thinking about my first electric car, and then I had to go back a little further because I'm thinking about the Prius that we own. As a hybrid, it's it was unique, battery powered and it shut the engine down. There was a lot of things about that were at the time were shocking. But I've always wanted something other than a internal combustion engine. It felt kind of like, I don't know, a tube TV instead of a flat screen. It just felt like there's got to be new technology out there. So to me, in some ways, it's been a technology, looking for the latest technology. And I was very interested and I bought a 2010 Chevy Volt. That's with a V. The Volt is a plug-in hybrid that will get 50 miles on a drive, and then the internal combustion kicks in. Well, most Americans don't drive more than 50 miles in a day, so I could plug it into 110 volts at night, and it was good in the morning. I would put gasoline in it once a year. A great car. It is. My only, Chevy backed out of making those anymore, and I think it's because it's, you're doubling the drivetrains, and that can make, instead of less moving parts, you end up with more. But it was still a very good car. And then I test drove a Tesla Roadster in 2010 a couple of times, and finally ended up buying a 2010 Roadster used in 2012. And that's they only made like 2,500 of them on a Lotus Elise chassis. Still have the car. In the meantime, I've gone through a Model S and a Model Y and an X, and right now with a Cybertruck. So exclusively Tesla, although I'm not married to them by any stretch. So far, it's just been about latest technology and I like the concept that my Cybertruck will back up my house and when the next hurricane comes.
Yes, that's a great feature of some of the vehicles today. You can plug them into your house if there's a power outage and power your essential appliances and even more. But that's limited at the moment, but it's doable with quite a few of the cars now. But I've driven your sports car, and that should more properly be called a rocket, I believe. And that was one of the very first Tesla vehicles, I believe.
It was the first, and there was a limited number made. There's probably only 1,500 of them left worldwide. And the servicing on them there's not a whole place. Well, actually, Tesla still services it. It can take a while to get it serviced, but each Tesla has improved in quality until the latest is zero problems. I haven't had any issues at all with the latest one. So I feel like we're in the Model T era of electric cars. Nobody thinks about this, but at the time that was revolutionary technology, and there was no gas stations. They had to agree on what gas to put in each car, and because everybody was trying kerosene and the standards for the nozzle were all different, and there was a lot of disruption and chaos with the internal combustion engine that I feel like that's kind of where we're at now with EVs. It's just that my EV is a lot more comfortable than a Model T.
Right. And interestingly, the truck you mentioned has independent steering for the wheels?
Or four-wheel steering, yeah. So it's bigger than I really need, but it also gets around inside of parking lots with little problem.
All right. Thanks, Colin. We're turning to Kevin Douglas now, the secretary of the organization. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, David.
Hey, let us know what it's been like for you, and especially about your electric airplane.
Okay. Hello, everybody listening to the show. Welcome. Thank you for listening. I was thinking back on my experiences with cars, and the first things I remember, of course, was riding beside my mother in a car without seatbelts, and the safety system of the car was her arm coming out and holding me in place when we stopped or made a steep turn.
Right.
And then when I was probably 7 years old, my dad started to let me sit next to him and steer the car. And that was exciting for me. And I had an uncle that had a farm, and he used to let me drive his little diesel truck around on the farm. And I even in a city down in Buenos Aires, Argentina, with all the traffic, I was probably 14, 15, and he said we pulled up to a building, and he said, "Just go around the block. I'll be right back." So those are some of my experiences. And then my first car that the car that I got my driver's license in was a little Honda Accord, a 1977 Honda Accord when I was 16. I still have that car, converted it to electric several years ago. And that takes me to electric cars. And what got me interested in electric cars, a little bit like Colin, we've been doing this internal combustion thing for a long time. And by the way, I was one of these kids that grew up my dad was an engineer, and I grew up fixing the cars and the lawnmowers and everything else that had an engine and even motors on it. And I was always interested about how things were put together. But both my parents had gone through the Depression and the Great War, and they were, as a lot of folks from that generation, very, very keen on getting everything you can out of what you have. Don't waste anything. And so I think that the roots of my interest in electric was we can do something in a better way. We can move ourselves in a better way, more efficient way. So efficiency, the amount of energy, use to move us, I think, is what has driven my automobile and airplane stuff. On a little side note, I'm an airline pilot, and in my career of 35 years, well, actually 40, coming up on 40 years, we have, and this is a few years back, we have, I used to fly the 727 and flew the 737, and those two airplanes carry the same amount of people, about the same amount of payload. But the 737 burns half the fuel that the 727 did. So late 1950s technology and late 1990s to 2000s, so 40 years, half the fuel burn on aviation, and it's even better today. I've been driving electric cars, just getting in them and driving them since the early 2000s. After the conversion, our first vehicle was a little Nissan Leaf. We drove it 50,000-60,000 miles. Then we bought a Bolt. We've actually had a couple of Bolts like Robert has. And then the Bolt got us to Austin and San Antonio and even Dallas, where family was. That's why we got that car. And then we got a Tesla Model 3, which we still have, has over 100,000 miles on it. And we also now have a Model Y, which I use. The reason I got that car is so that I could tow my glider trailer. So I have a motor glider that is a self-launching 2-seat side-by-side motor glider. With a decent gliding performance, and you take off with the electric motor, and then you stow it in the fuselage, and then you glide using the thermals down here around our area, and I love it. Just like it's been mentioned, the maintenance on the vehicles is you got to replace the tires every 50,000 miles. You have to replace the windshield wipers when they're not doing so well after 3-4 years. Keep windshield washer fluid in the car, and maybe every 5 years or so you change the 12-volt battery, because these electric cars have a 12-volt battery, and that's it. That's all we have done to our vehicles.
Yes,
And
I rarely look under the hood, and we even having a hood you can look under and see anything is sort of a rarity with some of these vehicles. But with the Bolt that we have, you can pop the hood and see what's in there. All the batteries are underneath the car. But I want to thank you, and I want to take you up on your offer of a ride in your glider, and perhaps we could do an entire episode in the glider. But that'll be in the future. I want to thank everyone for participating in this today. We're going to wrap up now. I want to remind you that you can get in touch with Houston, Texas Electric Vehicle Association at their website, HoustonEVA.org. And they also have a newsletter, YouTube channel, and Facebook presence. All of those very informative and things you can add to. But we want this also to be a discussion with you listening. So eventually we'll have call-in segments and ways to post your questions to HoustonTXEVA@gmail.com. That address may change over the weeks for this particular show. But again, you've been listening to Houston EV Hub with the officers of the Houston Electric Vehicle Association. Again, I'm David C. Lowy, and I'd like to say that as far as electric vehicles go, they're here, they're near, and there's not that much to fear.
There's a line on the ground that'll take you anywhere.